Hello friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. This is going to be my mid-year freakout tag. I don't remember who originally created this tag. I first did it last year, and I will link my one for last year down below. But this is just a time to kind of go over a few questions all about the books that I have read so far this year, and maybe about some books that I have coming down the pipeline. So I have my phone, so I can look at the questions, and this is going to be a little bit, well, not a little bit, it's going to be kind of off the cuff. I didn't prepare any answers for this, so I might be kind of wandering around this room trying to find the books for this. But let's go ahead and get into the first question. So the first one is, what is the best book you've read this year? I use Goodreads regularly. I'm on there all the time, so I'm just going to kind of go through my Goodreads, my read list, and figure out the best book that I've read this year. I need to pick one. Okay. I feel like this is kind of hard. Like, I've read plenty of 5-star books, and I'm trying to figure out which one really stands out to me as my favorite. I'm not really sure. Okay, so I think what I'm gonna have to choose for the best book that I've read this year, I listened to it on audiobook. I don't have a physical copy, but that would be, I think, I have to say, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. And this is a fiction novel about this girl named Vanessa who was sexually abused by a teacher when she was young, with a very huge age gap, and she wants to believe that the relationship between the two of them was real, and that it was real love, and she doesn't want to kind of accept the fact that it was abuse, it was not a healthy relationship, and she basically, you go through two timelines, one in the past when she's kind of actively being groomed and made to believe that she's in this relationship with this older man, and then the present day where she's having to kind of accept the reality of the situation as these sexual assault allegations are being levied towards that teacher. And this was 5 stars. It was gripping. It was frustrating. It was disgusting. It was just like horrifying. It was really good. Obviously not like an enjoyable read, but the audiobook is really good. I was just really captivated by this whole situation that she's in. And again, it's not a very fun book, but I think of all the books that I read this year, the best was My Dark Vanessa, and it will definitely stick with me, and highly recommend if you're kind of in the headspace to read about a situation like that. It was really well done. So yeah, I think My Dark Vanessa has to take the best book that I've read so far this year. Question number 2 is, what is the best sequel you've read this year? And I have read a lot of sequels. There are a few series that I have that I am trying to finish. So I've read quite a few sequels, and let me see, what is the best one I've read? There are a couple good contenders here. I've read a lot of good sequels. Okay, I think the 2 that immediately stand out to me are the second book in the Legendborn series, which is Bloodmarked, and then the third book, the last book in the Nevernight Chronicle, which is Dark Dawn. So which one do I think is better? I'm really struggling to pick between these two, but you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and say that Bloodmarked is the best sequel I've read this year. I did listen to it on audiobook, and actually, fun fact, Legendborn, the first book in the series, is the first book that I ever listened to on audiobook ever. But I love this series. I bought the first book physically, and I do have the special Owl Crate special order edition of Bloodmarked, so I have it here. This is about a girl named Brianna Matthews who joins this secret order, the Order of the Round Table, and she is kind of drawn into this world of magic, and she's trying to figure out what happened to her mom, who was killed. She thinks that she might have been involved, and the Order of the Round Table fights demons, basically, and protects the regular world of people from demons. And she kind of discovers that she has some abilities of her own. And this book, there was so much going on in this second book. There's a little bit more traveling well, a lot more traveling than in the first book. You meet a bunch of new characters, and there's like a love triangle situation. I love Jonice Abbott Pratt as the narrator for the audiobooks as well. I think she's a really great audiobook narrator. And yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say that book 2 is my favorite sequel I've read so far this year. Even though I really enjoyed Dark Dawn, the Nevernight Chronicle is awesome, but I don't know, something about this series just is so close to my heart because it was the first audiobook that I'd ever listened to. Book 1 was. So yeah, Bloodmarked. Question 3 is, what is a new release you haven't read but want to? And I guess new release is kind of subjective, but I guess I'll assume that maybe that means released this year. Thank goodness for Goodreads, because I cannot keep track of all of this stuff. Okay, so let me look through my list here. Man, yeah, there's so many things that came out this year that I could choose to read, but I'll go ahead and pick the one that is kind of glaringly sitting here on my shelf, which is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This is the prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, which came out like a couple years ago or a few years ago, and it was a standalone, and this is a prequel, so you don't have to have read Priory, I don't think, to read this. But this is a chonky book. Let's see how many pages. So I think, not including like dramatis personae and stuff at the end, there's 862 pages in this book. So she chonky, she beautiful. Dragons are my thing. I'm obsessed with dragons. So I hope I can get to this year. I have some other stuff I want to read, and of course this is going to take a lot longer than a 300 or 400 page book. But it's been so long since I've read Priory. This is obviously a fantasy with dragons, and there are a lot of strong female characters. There was a lot of LGBT rep in the other book. So I'm not even sure what the prequel is about. Honestly, but it's stunning, gorgeous, and hopefully I can try and squeeze this in sometime this year. Question 4 is, what is your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? And I think I remember that last year I had been focused on buying and reading older books, so I had a hard time with this question, but I think off the top of my head, actually, yeah, I don't even need to look for this one. I am so excited to read, I think, Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree, which is a prequel to Legends and Lattes. And this follows an orc barbarian named Viv who decides to give up her life of adventuring and murdering to open up a coffee shop. It's like quintessential cozy fantasy, and I don't remember what the prequel is about, but I think it does feature Viv, maybe before she gives up her adventuring life or as she's giving it up. But it's a prequel to Legends and Lattes, and I'm so excited. This was one of my favorite books that I read last year. I actually met Travis at a signing and got my book signed. So yeah, I'm just really excited for Bookshops and Bone Dust. The cover is beautiful, and yes, really excited for that. Question number 5, what is the biggest disappointment you've read? So I've read a few books that were not great. I didn't have a lot where I had expected greatness and then got, you know, something really low, even though I did read some stuff that was low. So let me see here. Also, if I'm like swaying during this video, I guess I have a nervous energy about me at the moment. So I'm trying to not do this like I'm rocking on a ship all the time. But if you see me moving, it's definitely not on purpose. I suppose I'll say that the biggest disappointment I've read so far this year was the audiobook for The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. This is a time travel fantasy that takes place in New York, and I was just so bored with so much of this book. At this point, I barely remember anything about it. There's time travel involved, and this girl travels back in time to try and find these artifacts, and I didn't care about any of the characters except for like one guy, the love interest. He was kind of interesting. I think his name was Hart Darrigan was his name. But anyway, the plot, like, this is gonna be the most boring review trying to talk about this because I was so bored. I didn't care about the plot. I didn't care about the characters. I gave it 2 stars. I'll link my review for it so you can kind of see more of my full thoughts. But yeah, I'd say The Last Magician, it was disappointing because it was one of the older books that I've had on my TBR, the longest, and I got it like on sale or something on Audible, and I was excited to read it, and it was really disappointing in that way. It was just like, I don't care about anything that's going on. I sped up the audio faster than I've ever listened to an audiobook before so that I could just get it done. I stopped paying attention, which I never do. I'll rewind if I didn't grasp something, but I started to just not care about what I was potentially missing. I didn't care about anything. So yeah, Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell was probably the most disappointing thing I've read this year. Question number 6, what is the biggest surprise you've read? So I would say that the biggest surprise for me is one of the first books I read this year, which was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I had read the entirety of Throne of Glass, and overall I did enjoy it. There were some ups and downs in the journey. Some books were better than others, but I was really nervous about going into this because I'd heard that it was more romance heavy and a lot heavier on just the sexy snarling fae situation, and I don't love that kind of fae, so I was kind of nervous about going into this, but I went into it with an open mind, and I ended up giving this 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I like the main character a lot more than the main character in Throne of Glass. I liked the relationship. And I love Sarah J. Maas, I think, does really good world building. So I enjoyed the world building, and yeah, I was pleasantly surprised that I enjoyed this as much as I did. I know people love to shit on this series, but I thought it was good. It's not a new favorite or anything, but I give it 5 stars. And I enjoyed it, so that was a very pleasant surprise. And it's basically about this human named Feyre who ends up kind of being taken kind of prisoner hostage-esque to the fairylands, and she kind of falls in love with the the ruler of the spring court, and she gets involved in fairy nonsense madness, and yeah. Question number 7, who is a new favorite author? So I am going to say that a new favorite author this year is T. Kingfisher, who wrote Nettle and Bone, and then I also read The Seventh Bride by her, which is kind of an older one of her stories. And I have a couple other books by T. Kingfisher that I haven't read yet, so I've only read 2 books by her, but I just have a really good feeling that I'm gonna really enjoy all the books she writes. And so this is like kind of folktale horror fantasy, and that's basically the same as Seventh Bride. That's also kind of fantasy horror folktale based off of folktale, and I think she knows how to write just these snappy bits of horror. This is not a long book. A lot of her books are kind of on the shorter side, and she just knows how to write horror really well, and the characters are fun and quirky, and her books really do just kind of have a fairy tale vibe to them. And again, I've only read 2 of her books, but I've really enjoyed them. I enjoy her writing style a lot, so I'm looking forward to reading a couple more of her books in the fall, October range, when it's kind of more spooky season appropriate. So yeah, T. Kingfisher. Question number 8, who is your newest fictional crush? Okay, I just spent like 10 minutes trying to come up with an answer to this question because I don't really have one. There really isn't a character that I'm like, oh, I'm so crushing on them or whatever. The only thing that I can think of is, and this is kind of a weird answer, but the closest thing that immediately popped into my head is Hoyd from Tress of the Emerald Sea, from Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere universe in general. The person who narrates this book, he's the one who's telling the story, and he is also a character in the story as well. But Hoyd is a recurring character in all of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere books. He's very mysterious, he's very witty, he's very sharp, and he's funny, but he's also, there's something about him. He's very mysterious. No one really knows who he is. He's an ancient being, but he's just like, he's so funny, and I don't know, like, it's a weird, I have a little bit of a crush on Hoyd, I guess. And he's a fan favorite. People love Hoyd. So that's like the closest thing that I can think of to come up with as a character that I, you know, crush on, I guess. Then question number 9, who is your newest favorite character? So for this question, I'm gonna go ahead and say that my newest favorite character is Mia Corvair from the Nevernight Chronicle. So this is the 3rd book. So this is the only book that I have read this year, the 3rd and last book in the series, Dark Dawn. And Mia she does a good job of walking that fine line between, you know, cocky and confident. I don't like cocky main characters. I do like confident main characters, though. I like confident, competent main characters, and she is very competent. She's very powerful. She has gone through the ringer. This book follows Mia, who is basically trying to get revenge against the people who are responsible for murdering her family. So Mia is just such a badass. She goes through a lot, and I think she's just super badass and awesome. So Mia, I'd say, is my new favorite character. Not of all time necessarily, but that I've read this year, I'd say. Question number 10, what is a book that made you cry? So this is an easy one, actually, and this goes without saying. Volumes 2, 3, and 4 of Heartstopper made me cry. Book 1 did not, but literally books 2, 3, and 4, the rest of the books that are out, have all made me cry. And this is just the most wholesome, sweet, lovely, wonderful story about these 2 boys, Nick and Charlie, who fall in love. And it is just so cute, so sweet, really touching, and yeah, 2, 3, and 4 all made me cry. So yeah. Question number 11, what is a book that made you happy? So I would say the whole Heartstopper series. That whole series is just some of the most joyous, sweet, happiest books I've read. But to go ahead and kind of keep things interesting, I'm gonna go ahead and say, and this might be a strange pick, but I'm gonna say House of Salt and Sorrows, which I just finished this month, by Aaron A. Craig, and this is a horror fantasy that is based off of the 12 Dancing Princesses story, and you're following this girl who's trying to figure out what happened to her sisters, some of her sisters who have died mysteriously. She thinks there must be something going on. It's kind of gothic, haunted house ghost vibes, and it made me happy because, so this was a 5-star. I'd been looking forward to reading this for a while, and so it made me happy because I enjoyed it so much. This is just, so when I find horror that just tickles that mark for me, it's just really exciting because I love supernatural, you know, scary ghost, you know, that kind of horror. So just when I find books that just perfectly tick that mark, it just gets me really excited. So I really enjoyed this, along with like Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. That was one of my favorite books that I read like a couple years ago, and that also was just perfectly my brand of horror, and it gets me really excited because I'm like, oh yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So yeah, maybe a strange choice because it's horror based, but House of Salt and Sorrows definitely has made me very happy and excited, if you couldn't tell. Question number 12, what is the most beautiful book you got this year? So I'm gonna have to just kind of look around. I have to figure out which books I got this year versus last year. That might be kind of tricky. So let me look around here. This is another tricky one, but I think, so honestly, I think the winner for me has to be A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. I mean, it's so beautiful. I don't really need to even say more. I think that this cover is stunning. I also love the cover of The Priory of the Orange Tree, but I got this when it came out earlier this year. I think it's absolutely stunning. But I will go ahead, and since I already used that earlier for something, I'll go ahead and say that something about the cover for Flower Heart is just so cute. It's, and the back is really cute too. I have both of these books facing this way. Instead of the spine facing out, I have the front facing out because it's just really pretty. And I don't really know much about this. I think this girl is trying to save her dad or something. She's able to like make plants bloom inside people or something like that. She's able to somehow like has some kind of plant magic or something. And I think that this artwork is just really cute. It just looks soft, and I think it's kind of cozy fantasy almost. But yeah, haven't read this yet, but looking forward to this. And then the last question, question 13, what books do you have to read before the end of the year? So there are a couple books that I do want to read for sure before the end of the year. I am all this year I've been working on doing the Beat the Backlist challenge for 2023, which means reading a bunch of books that came out before this year. So I have a couple in mind that fulfill certain prompts that I definitely want to try and get to. For instance, Street Freaks by Terry Brooks, Tokyo Ever After. I think I want to try and read Gallant by V.E. Schwab, which is on my shelf. I want to read The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater in November. I think I want to try and read this middle grade novel called When You Trap a Tiger. So yeah, I have a few books and I haven't started any of those yet, but those are some of the ones that I for sure am going to get to by the end of the year, unless I find something else that fulfills the prompts better than the ones that I just listed. Those all kind of fulfill some of the prompts, so I have them ready to go. But yeah, so those are some of the books that I need to read before the end of the year. And those are all the questions. I feel like this was kind of chaotic. I maybe should have prepared a little bit better. I really didn't. I just had to start scrolling through Goodreads, and I had to keep turning off the camera because I was standing there for 5 minutes doing nothing, trying to figure out what my answer was going to be. But yeah, I enjoy doing this tag. I love scrolling back and seeing all the things that I've read this year. So yeah, hopefully I have a good second half of the year. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!